going to begin Daf Nun. We are Nun Amid Base 50b. Today's Daf is Nun Aleph, and we will do the last bits of Nun. We were talking about various work being done, and so the Gemara said, Tana Rabbanan, and this is the third line of the wide lines. Tana Rabbanan Mistake Bekanim, somebody who does business as work in kanim, in reeds, or bekan kanim, or in jugs. So you will not see a simon bracha, will not be worthy of blessing in his work. Ever. My time, and what's the reason for that? Even the nafish afchazayim, since it is these are very large items, so it looks like he's doing very well. It looks like he's doing a lot of work. Shalta be'ena, so people notice, and there's a sense of evil eye, jealousy, and negativity towards his work. Tana Rabbanan, the Brisa taught further, Tagre Simta, those that work in the marketplace, and everybody sees their work and their products. And also those that raise sheep and goats in Eretz Yisrael. And since the sheep and goats are always nibbling at other people's products and property, and those that cut down good trees for timber, and people talk about it, saying, "No, that was a good tree. Why did that go down?" Or those that are always taking the best portion. So they're not going to see cinnamon bracha. They're not, because people are always looking at them with skepticism and with really wishing that they don't succeed. My time at the Torah Inshu is people are always wondering about them and concerned about what they're doing, that maybe it's not good, and without the blessing of others, it's not going to be successful. Tana Rabbanan, Dal Arba Prutis, Amen Simon Bracha. There are four types of coins that if somebody were to do work in them, even if it's a small amount, it's not going to see simon bracha. There's not going to be blessings in these. Schar kesvid, those that when people charge for being a scribe, for writing, schar maturgaman, and for those that are the schar, the reward for people that are maturgaman, are charging for repeating the teachings in the academy. The schar yisamim, and the fees for taking care of the wares, or the business, taking care of basically the custodians of orphan accounts, and essentially it looks like they're charging money or taking money of the orphans, and money coming from other countries, from overseas. So the people taking fees, charging for targo, for repeating, and basically whatever the teacher would teach. They didn't necessarily have a voice. There was no microphones, obviously, so they didn't have a voice necessarily that could be heard by all. So they would teach, and they had a maturgam, and somebody who would repeat the teaching so that everybody could hear it. Mishum the Mechzik is Shabbos, that they would do so on Shabbos as well. So it looked like they were doing work on Shabbos. And the money for orphans, meaning somebody who was a custodian of orphan accounts, and looks like they're making money off of the orphan's estate, accounts. Because if they make any mistakes, there's no mechila, there's no for the orphans are not going to forgive them necessarily because they're children.
Rabbi, could you please give me the page number and position on the page?
Sure, 50b, Nun Amid Base, and we are about 10, 12 lines from the bottom. The first word is Ninu.
Thank you.
And money coming from foreign countries. If somebody's main line of work is import-export overseas, and the likelihood back then of ships making it across the sea was it was definitely perilous, and so even though they make money one day or 2 days, it's a very dangerous business. But for those that are scribes and writing, my time, what would be the problem with that? Why would they not count? Why would there be no bracha in that? It's because the Great Assembly, the Anshe Knesset Gdola, they actually fasted 24 fasts, so that those that write Sefer Torah, Tefillin, and Mezuzah, Hein v'Tagrein, they and the merchants, v'Tagre Tagrein, and the merchants of the merchants, and all those that are toiling in this heavenly work, including those that sell the blue-dyed threads, blue-dyed wool for tchelas and the tzitzis, and also for the Beis Hamikdash, for the Kohen's garments, that they should not see a bracha la'olam. And the reason is because if you're only doing it for the money, and so then as soon as you become wealthy, you're not going to write a Sefer Torah anymore, or mezuzah anymore, or you're not going to sell it anymore. So that they prayed that they should not become wealthy, just make enough to live and no more. However, but if somebody does it for the sake of the mitzvah, and therefore it doesn't make a difference whether or not, even if they become wealthy, they would still continue doing the mitzvah, right? So then they will see a siman bracha in what they're doing. So all this was once the Mishnah had said that there's no work to be done on Erev Pesach, in some places, even from the morning, but for everybody from Chatzos, from the afternoon, and Erev Shabbos and Motzei Shabbos, there was a list of people that do work that they would not see bracha, not see blessing in their work. And so the Gemara went through many of these scenarios of lack of bracha, either on account of when they're doing the work, or the type of work they're doing, or the evil eye, the perspective of other people, which is negative towards their work. The Mishnah had said that there's an obligation to follow the custom and to maintain that custom. So the Gemara here is really going to bring up the basis for this idea of that you have to follow the customs, even if it's not necessarily a prohibition. Bnei Baisha, people of Beit Shad, know that they have the custom there was that they would not travel from Tyre to Tzidon B'Maleh Shabbos on Friday, because it was a distance that was far enough that you're taking a chance of not having time to prepare for Shabbos when you get there. And so if there is any disturbance along the way, it's going to take longer. And so they wouldn't travel that way on Friday. But however, their children came before Rabbi Yochanan, the head of the academy in Eretz Yisrael, and Amrle, they said to him, Avhasin, Efshalu, our parents could afford to not travel, and therefore not do business on Friday. Anan, lo yavshalat, but we can't, we're too reliant on this travel. Amar Lahu, he said to them, Kvar kiblu avasechem aleihem, your parents have already accepted this as a custom, and that becomes an obligation. Shenemar, as it says, Shema b'ni musar avicha, listen, my son, to the the disciplines of your father, and do not abandon the teachings of your mother. Now, the basis for this is a lengthy halachic discussion as to whether this is a neder on the basis of an oath or some sort of Kabbalah or some sort of other obligation from this verse, besides for a neder, an oath. And if there is an obligation from an oath perspective, we know that there is a concept of nullification of a vow and an oath. So can these children nullify it and change the minhag? Now we know that there is an obligation of a minhag of a custom of places, and also is the question: is this an individual family's obligation? So can a parent just accept something upon themselves and then it becomes the obligation of the child for generations? Or is this only when it became a communal custom on account of that, and therefore it now is communally an obligation? And the Gemara here, we could just point out, didn't say just one family, but people of a specific place, and it had already been accepted, the custom. And in that case, Rabbi Yochanan said that they are bound by it. It does not make mention of whether they can annul this vow. In the Yerushalmi, there is a mention as to the annulment of the vow. In any case, this is the basis for many halachic obligations that became a communal obligation and obligate everyone in the community. Bnei Chuzai, the people of Mechuzah, they would take challah from bread made out of rice bread. Now, this is halachically incorrect because, as we've seen, only the five grains are obligated in challah and in matzah. The 5 grains being wheat, barley, oat, spelt, and rye. Now, Asav Amru Leilu Rav Yosef. So people came and said to Rav Yosef, Mechuzah, they're taking challah, separating challah off of the dough of rice bread. Amalahu nechla zarba payim. A non-Kohen should eat that piece, that separated bread, the challah that they separated, which is a gift to the Kohen. A non-Kohen should eat it in front of them to show them that it's meaningless what their act they're doing. It's halachically a non-entity. You can't take challah from oranges because challah is made out of dough. You also can't take challah out of rice bread because it just doesn't. It's not obligated, and so it doesn't work. So Abaye challenged Rabbi Yosef and said, "Wait, but didn't we learn things, even if they are permissible? If others accept upon themselves, or they act in them as if it is prohibited, meaning they're being strict about something that halachically is permissible." Now we're at the top of Nun Aleph Amud Aleph 51a. So is something that others that is permissible and others consider prohibited, and so they act strictly with them. You're not allowed to say it's permissible or act in front of them and that it's permissible. Amr Loi, so Rav Yosef responded, "Yeah, where's that talking about? Who's that talking about?" Did not Rav Chisda explain that teaching? Bekutai. That's the Kutai people who had converted to Judaism, but were not as a community observant in all of teaching. So the things that they would do, you wouldn't tell them are wrong because it's going to confuse them. They're not going to know what is or isn't permissible. And if you tell them in such a case, let's say don't take challah from rice bread, they may end up not taking challah from bread that needs it. So just if they're being strict in something, leave it. So kutai my timing. What's the reason of the kutai? Because they're going to make mistakes. And if you tell them that they don't have to take a separation of challah off of rice bread, they may stop doing it also for their wheat bread, which obviously is an obligation. Hanach inshi nami sarchi milsis. So in Mechuzah as well, they were very wealthy, and the people were not so they were not so well educated in halacha, and so if you tell them to stop taking the rice bread challah off of rice bread, they're going to make mistakes. Ela Amar Rav Ashi, therefore Rav Ashi says quite the contrary. Chazina. So we have to look at what the custom, what is popular there. Ruban, or is if most of their breads are made of rice bread, achli loinechli zarba payu, then don't eat. A non-kohen should not eat the challah pieces in front of them. In other words, don't teach them that it's wrong. Why? Since most of their breads are rice bread, and you tell them not to take a separation of challah off of it, they're going to make mistakes, and they're going to forget the teaching of separation of challah entirely, because they're most of their bread they're not going to separate. However, if most of the bread is out of the 5 grains, then it's okay to correct to teach them that rice bread doesn't need challah taken from it, and therefore a non-kohen should eat the separated challah, to show them that, oh, you don't need to take from rice bread, because they're going to remember and know the distinction between wheat and rice, and they'll remember to take challah off of wheat bread or rye bread, etc. And actually, there's a concern. The halacha is that you can only take separation of bread, of challah, from obligated breads. In fact, even of some of the obligated breads, you can't take from one type to another, such as from wheat onto barley, if they're not touching or mixed together. So the concern is you can't take challah from barley on a wheat bread. And if they think that they both are obligated, we saw earlier that even if you have separate breads, as long as they're in the same basket or with a cover over it, then you can take challah from one batch to another. So what they may end up doing is they'll make a rice bread, and then they'll make a wheat bread, and they're going to put them together in one basket and take a piece of the white bread, of the rice bread as challah, and think that it works to exempt or to cover even the wheat bread. And it doesn't, because obviously one's an obligated food item in challah and one is not obligated. And if you separate the challah from the non-obligated, it's not going to exempt the obligated. And so therefore, it's important for them to know that there's no obligation for the rice bread. And the other way around. So therefore, it says that you should make it known to them that rice bread does not need a separation of challah. Gufa. So now let's analyze the body of that statement itself, that when somebody or people accept upon themselves and do something that is permissible, and they're acting in a prohibition, you shouldn't correct them. You shouldn't say that it's permissible in front of them. Gufa dvarma matar v'chem nagam emisser. Permissible items or things that people are strict about and prohibit. You cannot, in front of them, say that it's permissible. And Rav Chisda explained this to talk about the Kutites who were Jewish but were not fully observant, or were not observant of many things, and it confused them. The Kuli Almaloi, but is that really only for the Kutites? Is Rav Chisda correct? Isn't it true that this is true for other community, for everyone? Matani will learn. So here we're going to get into an interesting set of halachas, which some people would be strict about various things that are permissible on account of the prohibited items or prohibited actual prohibitions, and we see cases where people were strict on account of that. This halacha pertains to bathing together, two people bathing together, that either brothers, and it was considered a lack of modesty if they were to bathe together. So obviously in bathhouses there were many people bathing together. However, two brothers may bathe together. But in this place, Kabul, place near Haifa in northern Israel, they would not. The custom was that brothers would not bathe together. It was considered an indecency. Umaisa Yehuda, and a story happened in Yehuda, in the area of Judea, that Hillel, Yehuda, a mistake, not in the area, it was in Kabul, but in the two sons of Rabbi Gamliel, Yehuda and Hillel, Banav Rabbi Gamliel, Sherachatzu Shneim, that both of them went into the bathhouse together to bathe Ke'echad, Kabul, in this place, Kabul. V'laz aleim kol Medina, and everybody started chatting about it. Did you see the two sons of Rabbi Gamliel? They're in the bathhouse together. Amru miyameinu l'reinu kach. They said, we never saw something like this. V'nishmat Hillel v'yatza l'beis hachitzah. So Hillel walked out into the changing room to wait for his brother to finish his bathing. And he didn't want to tell them, oh, this is something that's actually permissible. He didn't say it's permissible. Rather, he waited outside rather than to correct them. So you see that since they assume it was prohibited, he kept that prohibition. Jared, what's the question?
Sorry, I think I just bumped it.
Oh, okay, fine.
My apologies.
No problem. So he wouldn't correct them. Similarly, another story. Yotzim Mekur the Kisun B'Shabbos. There were these boots or narrow shoes that were made to go to protect the feet from walking in water or wet surfaces. So you can wear them on Shabbos. There's no concern that once you're done, you're gonna take them off and carry it. However, in this place Biri, they would not wear it on Shabbos. And again, these two sons of Rabbi Gamliel, Yehuda and Hillel, they were wearing them in Shabbos. They were wearing them on Shabbos. In this place Biri. And people started chatting about them. They said, people were saying, we never saw people do this. What's up with the children of Rabbi Gamliel doing this? So they took it off, and they gave it to their servants, and they wouldn't wear these in this place, rather than telling them, by the way, there's absolutely no reason not to wear this, it's permissible. Instead, they accepted what the people were saying, that okay, no one does this here, so they took it off and went with it. Well, they didn't say to them, oh, by the way, it's permissible. Similarly, also Sali Nachrim b'Shabbos, and you can sit on the benches of the non-Jewish merchants in the marketplace on Shabbos. But you can't do it in Akko because that's what the custom was. People wouldn't do it. And Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, the son of Rabbi Gamliel, or maybe in one version says Rabbi Gamliel himself, Sheyoshav al Safsali Nachrim b'Shabbos. He did sit on one of these benches in the marketplace. Ba'ako. People started talking. You see, he's sitting on the chair or the bench of the merchants. They said, we never saw anybody do this. Nishmat v'yashav al gad bekarka. He moved himself off the bench and sat down on the ground, rather than to tell them, oh, by the way, that's totally permissible. And he didn't tell them, oh, that's a permissible thing to do. So we see, how could you, Rav Chisda, say that this is only by the Kutites or people who in particular things are very not learned, and so they're going to be confused by you telling them it's permissible? It seems like this is a general thing. So the Gemara says no. These places that didn't have scholars and rabbis, so it was similar. These were cities or villages or areas that didn't have chachamim there, and it's the same idea. If you start telling them on your single visit to the place, oh, that's a permissible thing, they won't know the distinction of where the line is, and may actually think that there is no prohibition around this area at all, and they may start carrying on Shabbos, thinking that, oh, there's no concern of wearing these boots and then taking them off and carrying them on Shabbos. That means you're allowed to carry on Shabbos, etc. So you're allowed to do business on Shabbos with the merchants because Rabbi Gamliel sat down on the bench there, seemingly ready to do business with it. Now the Gemara explains, sitting on those benches, because it looks like you're doing business with them, you're buying and selling. And these water shoes, also because you may end up taking it off and carrying it 4 amos in a public domain, and that's why you're not allowed to carry it. But what's the problem with this bathing thing? My time alone. So what's the reason not to go bathing? Okay, the Tani we learned imakol adam rechetz. A person is allowed to go to the bathhouse with anybody. Chutz mi aviv v'chamav. Besides for his father and father-in-law, because it's a lack of modesty to see one's father unclothed. The text here says Baal Imo, also his mother's husband, a stepfather, but it seems to be a mistake in the text. And also his brother-in-law, his sister's husband. However, Rabbi Yehuda matir ba'aviv and b'nei kvoid. Aviv, Rabbi Yehuda says if your father needs a help, so then you're allowed to go in and help your father. Again, here it says also stepfather, and it seems to be a mistaken text. And these they came and they enacted also an idea of not doing so in Kabul, that brothers also should not go to bathe together. Mishum balachos, just as brothers-in-law should not go to bathe together. And to that, the children of Rabbi Gamliel, Yehuda, and Hillel, they accepted that in their town and would not tell them that they made a mistake. Tana, we learned. Talmud la yirchatzim rabba. A student should also not go to the bathhouse with his teacher. Ve'im rabbi tzarich le. Again, if the teacher needs the assistance, mutter, then you're allowed to. Kiasa Rabbi Bar Bachana achal de'yatra. Now there are forbidden fats and kosher fats in an animal. Basically, within the animal, are fats that are attached to the muscle itself, and that's what fats that are kosher and that we eat within meat. And then there are fats that encapsulate various organs, and they are in their own membrane, and they're really a separate entity from the muscle, from the organs itself. The kosher animals that chew their cud have multiple stomach system, and the fourth of these, in what halachically are called stomachs, is the abomasum, the keva, and the keva is sort of like this arched organ, and from there it goes to the intestine. And the inner arch of the keva, there's a fat that is attached to the organ itself, but also is attached to chaylev that covers the stomach. So that section that's attached to the abomasum, to the inner abomasum, is called the diatra, and it's really a permissible fat. However, because it's attached to and often confused with the chaylev, the forbidden fat that's right near it, in Bavel they wouldn't eat it. In Eretz Yisrael, however, they would eat it. So Rabbi Bar Bachana, who was a student of Rabbi Yochanan in Eretz Yisrael, when he came to Bavel, when he came to Babylon, so he ate this diatra, which is permissible in Eretz Yisrael, but in Bavel the custom was not to eat it. Olagabe Rabbi Avira, Saba v'Rabbi Bar Rav Huna. So two chachamim came to visit him. Kiva the chazinu. Once he saw them that they had come to visit, kasya minayim. So he covered what he had, the food he had, so that they wouldn't see that he was eating what they had considered what they would consider prohibited. Also, Amar Abaye, they came and they reported this to Abaye. Amar Luhu, Abaye said to these chachamim that came to Rabbi Vira and Rabbi Ben Rav Huna, so you should know, by his covering it up, shavinchu kekutai, he made it out to be that you're ignorant, like the Kutites, and therefore he he covered it so that because he didn't want to in front of you that you're strict, do something that he holds as permissible or in Eretz Yisrael is permissible. So the Gemara says, "V'Rabba bar bar Chana leslei had Tanama." Wait, how could he do this anyhow? Doesn't he know the Mishnah? In our Mishnah it says, if somebody has a custom where they're lenient at home, whatever it is, the custom of their country, of their hometown is lenient, and they come to a place that's strict, like in our Mishnah, which says that people that come from a place that you do work on the morning of Erev Pesach, and they go to a place that the custom is not to do work, you have to accept the stringencies, the strict halacha of the place where you're going to, and vice versa as well. If you come from a place that's strict and you come to a place that's lenient, that people are working, you maintain your original customs of being strict. So how can you say, how could Rabbi bar bar Chana have eaten this in Bavel? Don't we know that the halacha is that you have to accept, you have to maintain the stringencies of the place you've gone to? Abaye said, no, that in of itself is not a question on Rabbi bar bar Chana, because that would be true if you go from Bavel to Bavel, from two towns or two places within Babylon, within Bavel. Eretz Yisrael, or two places within Israel itself, Eretz Yisrael. Inami, mi Bavel Eretz Yisrael, or somebody comes from Bavel to Eretz Yisrael. So when he goes to visit Eretz Yisrael, he's going to have to accept the stringencies of the place he's gone to. Aval me Eretz Yisrael Bavel, but somebody who comes from the Holy Land to Bavel, to Babylon, like that, he does not need to accept the stringencies of the place that he's gone to. Why? Since we are beholden in Bavel, we were beholden to the academy and to the leadership of the Chachamim in Eretz Yisrael, and therefore we can accept, even though we have our own customs. If they come here, since they are essentially our leaders, they can continue the custom and the leniencies that they have in Eretz Yisrael. Rav Ashi says the reason is different. No, of course, everywhere you go, even from Eretz Yisrael to Bavel, even somebody traveling from Israel itself is going to have to accept the minhag hamakam, the custom of the place that they go to. However, in to be strict according to it. However, you do have to be strict if you come to Bavel and there's a stringency in Bavel. However, but that's only if you intend to remain in the place you've gone to. If Rabbi bar Chana only came for a visit, and therefore there was no reason for him to accept the customs as long as he was doing so privately. And so therefore, when the locals came in to visit him, he covered up what he was eating. Amalei Rabbi bar Chana lebnei. Now, Rabbi bar Chana said to his son, Beni, my son, don't eat this fat in front of me or not in front of me. Don't eat it. Why? I, who saw my teacher Rabbi Yochanan, who did eat this fat, I can rely on Rabbi Yochanan because I saw him do it. So I can rely on him, regardless of whether we're in front of him or not. I can follow his opinion because I saw him do it. However, you never saw him do it. So you should go with the majority opinion. You should follow what everybody else is doing. And therefore, don't eat these fats. Regardless if I'm there or not. Even if I'm eating it because I saw my teachers do it, you who didn't see them should actually follow what the people are doing. And this is a contradiction within Rabbi bar Chana himself, because in another scenario, he said that in front of him, others can eat with him. Rabbi bar Chana reported that once Rabbi Yochanan ben Elazar had told, I once walked into a garden following Rabbi Shimon, the son of Rabbi Yosef ben Lakunya. And now we turn to Nun Aleph Amid Beis. v'notal safiche kruv v'achal. And he took, safiach is the aftergrowth, that which grows even though it wasn't planted that year, and it was the Shemitah year. As we know, in the Shemitah year, you're not allowed to plant, and you're not allowed to harvest. And as the Rabbi Akiva is going to tell us soon, the Torah says, do not plant, do not harvest. And the Torah says, wait, what do you mean do not plant and do not harvest? If I can't plant, how am I going to harvest? So we see that the harvesting would be, the harvesting is prohibited even if I didn't plant it, but it's just from seeds that fell or some regenerated growth or things that last from year to year. We see that those are going to be prohibited as well, and it can only harvest them to eat for myself. I have to leave it free for anybody to get. It's hefker. And when I do take it for myself, we saw this concept of this is only true as long as there's some left in the field. But once the fields are fully harvested, so there's no food left for the animals either. So then I have to put it out for everyone to access. This is called biur. So he went ahead, v'notal safiche kruv, and in Brussels sprouts that grow on a stalk that sort of remains from year to year, but it's not an actual tree where that's not considered safiach. It's not considered something that's rebirth from year to year or like extra growth, because trees are made to grow and produce every year. But this is a vegetable, but it grows on a sort of like a stalk. So he went ahead and he ate some of these Brussels sprouts off of these stalk. He ate and he gave me to eat. V'amarli, and he said to us, Bani, my son, b'fanai acho, in front of me you can eat this because I actually saw my teacher do it. Shalei b'fanai lo techel, but not in front of me. Don't do it because there are those that the custom is not to eat these after growth, after the biur, after it's been the time to get rid of it, because there's not much left in the field. I saw Rabbi Shimon, the son of Rabbi of Yochai, that he ate the Brussels sprout after growth. So Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai, so it is worthy of Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai to support, to lean on him and as a halachic basis, whether he's here or not, because I saw him do it and he ate it, so we can eat it as well. But you can only do so in front of me. But if you're not with me, go with the common custom and don't eat it. And my Rabbi Shimon, what's the basis of Rabbi Shimon? What is this teaching of Rabbi Shimon that would eat this after growth in the Shemitah year? The time we learned Rabbi Shimon Aimer, Kol Asvichan Asur. Any safiach, anything that grows beyond in the Shemitah year, that even though it wasn't planted, but it grew from seeds that fell or some from leftover roots, etc. So they're all going to be prohibited beyond the time of the biur, beyond the time of the when you have to get rid of it. Chutz mi sfiche kruv, besides for the aftergrowth of Brussels sprouts, because the stalk remains, so it really is considered like it actually just last year's growth. And it's clearly distinct from the aftergrowth of other vegetables, which come from fallen seeds, etc. Because it's distinct from all other vegetables, as Rashi points out in the first version of Rashi. It's distinct on account of that it has this stalk that it grows off of. It's sort of tree-like, but it's not a tree, and therefore it's distinct from all other vegetables. However, the Chachamim say no, even Brussels sprouts, safiach is going to be prohibited. Even of Brussels sprouts. And they're both saying this on the basis of the teaching of Rabbi Kiva. The Tanya, Rabbi Kiva said, the Brisa taught in the name of Rabbi Kiva based on this verse. The pasuk says, the people, the Torah narrates that people are going to say, wait, if we're not planting in the Shemitah year, so how are we going to eat? But they didn't say if we're not planting in the Shemitah year. They said if we're not planting and we're not harvesting. So Rabbi Kiva says, wait, if you're not planting, of course you're not harvesting. Of course, if you're not planting, how would you harvest? So therefore, from the fact that they say we're not harvesting, that means that they can't even harvest that which is just an aftergrowth that fell from last year and that grew on its own. Still, you cannot harvest that. You can take in a little to eat, that would just for eating, but that's it. You cannot actually start gathering and harvesting. And so therefore we see that from the verse that on a Torah level, the safiach is going to be prohibited. And if it's prohibited, so therefore, even if it's a Torah prohibition, it makes sense that even though that the Brussels sprouts would not be included, nevertheless, since it looks the same, there could be a rabbinic prohibition. That the Rabbanan say, since it's a Torah prohibition, we're going to prohibit even the Brussels sprouts on account of that other aftergrowth are going to be prohibited. So the Brussels sprouts as well would need that same prohibition. Rabbi Shimon and Rabbi Shimon says, no, we're not concerned of confusion, and we're not going to enact a fence and say that Brussels sprouts are prohibited because they are so distinct and look different. On account of this stalk, the way they grow so differently than other vegetables. The Mishnah had said that somebody comes from a place that you don't work on Erev Pesach to a place that you do work, you have to be strict and not work. If you come from a place that you do work to a place that doesn't work, since the locals aren't working, you have to not work. But there's the next line is a contradiction, because it says, never do different than the locals, because you're going to cause a machlokas, you're going to cause a distinction, a fight, or some sort of issue with the locals. So don't separate yourself from the local custom. Now that's contradictory, because it said that if you come from a place not that you don't work, and you go to a place that people work, in the Mishnah it says you have to keep your strict custom of not working. But everybody else is working, and so I'm making a distinction. And in the next line you say, don't do different than the local custom. So it makes sense if you were lenient at home in your hometown to work on Erev Pesach, and you come to a place that people don't work. So you have to be strict like the local custom and not work. And don't be different, because it's going to cause issues. And therefore don't work. But if it's the other way around, where your custom is not to work, that's the hometown custom, Erev Pesach, you don't work. You come to a place that people do work. So it says, do not change from the local custom. Vanavit, it's seemingly meaning, and work. But that contradicts the line before that says, that you have to be strict, both based on the place you came from and the place you're going to. So this seems to be a contradiction. Amar Abaye, so Abaye said Aresha. Abaye says, you're right, it's only on the first part, and where you're going to a place that nobody works. But in a place that everybody's working and you don't take on the custom of the locals. However, no, it's going on the end as well. And this is what it says. This won't look like a change in custom from the locals, and it's not a problem. Why not? Micah Amris, what are you worried about? That somebody who sees the visitor not working is going to say, Malacha Asura, oh, he must hold that you're not allowed to work on Erev Pesach, and that's, and he's shown himself off against our custom. Meimar Amri, no, they're going to say, Kama batlani hava b'shuka. No, there are plenty of people who are out of work, who are in the marketplace looking for work, or just roaming and not working. The fact that they're not working is not enough of a reason to say that they are breaking the local custom, because there are many people that are locals that don't work on any given day. So Erev Pesach, somebody who's visiting and not working will not be showing himself to change to be in distinction to the local custom. Okay, We'll end there. See you all tomorrow. Wishing you a great day.